What is your favorite story of all time? Now imagine if the main character never went on the journey. Welcome, scribes of the extraordinary. Today we are going beyond entertainment and diving deeper into the craft of storytelling by talking about character arcs. I'm going to explain what a character arc is, all the elements that make up a character arc, and the importance of why you need an arc, as well as an example of one of my favorite character arcs in all of fiction. But first, a little disclosure. I found this video very, very difficult to prepare for. And here's why. Character arcs for me are very intuitive. They just come so naturally when I write that I really had to rack my brain around what are the core components of a character arc. So I've broken it down for you all into 5 core components. But first, what is a character arc? A character arc is the journey a character takes of growth. Now, this growth can be positive, this growth can be negative. There are actually 3 different character arcs. There is the positive arc, which we see in most stories where a character starts at one place and they end up in another place, ending up a better person for it. There is the negative character arc, where a character starts at one place, it tends to be a pretty good person, and they will descend into a bad place, turn into a more negative person, make bad decisions. Devil Wears Prada is a great example of this kind of arc. And then there's a third kind of arc, which is going to be the flat character arc. Not flat character as in they're boring, but a flat character as in they don't change themselves, but because of their stoicness, they change the world around them. Cinderella is a good example of this flat character arc, in that her being kind continually throughout the whole story forces the world around her to experience an arc. So there is always, always, always going to be some kind of growth arc in a story. Most of the time, it's going to be a positive arc for your protagonist. So that is what we are going to focus on today. So when we start off any story, you need to start off with the foundation. Now, the foundation of your character arc is going to be showcasing, well, who's your character? What's their normal everyday life like? Who are they? What do they do? What is their status quo? We need to know who your character is. We need to know about their life before we see this pivot in their life in the story. Because what's the point of seeing a change if we don't know what the change is starting from? So the foundation is going to be their character's initial state. Now, the first step in the character arc is going to be the catalyst. The catalyst is going to be when a need arises and change is forced. Now, the catalyst is often a small step, and the catalyst is often in plot structure called the inciting incident of the story. Now, the inciting incident is something big happens in the world of the protagonist. It could be, small in the concept of the entire book or movie, but it is a very big difference in the protagonist's normal everyday life that calls them to the adventure, that calls them to change. Now, the catalyst in the growth arc doesn't necessarily have to be when the inciting incident is in your story. Often, doesn't always have to be the case, but often your plot is going to coincide with your character's personal growth arc. Because your plot is your character makes a decision, the world reacts, and then they're forced to make another decision and the world reacts. The plot is this give and take between character making choices and the consequences of those choices. So these two things tend to coincide with each other. And that's why you'll hear some terms back and forth that used in character arcs, used in plot arcs, because they do tend to coincide. They don't have to. But your catalyst is going to be that first step. Now, something fun about the catalyst is you can, there's two options to the call adventure: yes or no. The story does not the story does not permit a permanent no, but your character can absolutely say no to the call of adventure. Look at Bilbo and Frodo, actually both, but we're going to focus on Bilbo. He has this wizard show up at his house and he's like, no, I don't want this. And then dwarf shows up and he's like, why are you in my house? Okay, I must be hospitable and take care of you. Why are there 2 more here? Why are there 3 more here? Why are there now a dozen dwarves in my house? What is going on? Why are all these people here? No, I'm not going to go on your crazy adventure. I'm perfectly happy in my home where it is calm and I have all the food I want and all the comforts of home. Then he wakes up the next morning and they're gone. But that call to adventure is still there and he has one last opportunity to join them. And he takes it. So your catalyst can be a little bit later than the inciting incident of your story. Your character can be hesitant about change because, let's face it, change is scary. Anyone who says they like change has convinced themselves to like change or to tolerate change for the greater good of something else. We do not like change. We don't like things to be different. We enjoy being comfortable. So your character will want to stay comfortable. They might have a wanderlust and be throwing the door open and running down before the opportunity even knocks on the door. And that is perfectly fine and viable as well. But even then, that want of change most likely isn't the want of growth. Because internal change and growing is truly difficult. The next step in the growth arc is going to be the turning point. And the turning point is a very loose term for when things begin to shift in your character. They start making decisions that are turning them more towards who they're supposed to be by the end of the story than who they were at the beginning. And the turning point is going to be the first of these many steps. There are going to be many, many circumstances where your character is going to take that decision to step closer and to grow more. For example, Bilbo, he starts really taking chances and he starts using his wit to get people out of situations. Like with the 3 trolls, he uses his intelligence and his quick thinking to talk his way out, talk his way for a long time until the sun comes up to save the entourage he's a part of. He slowly grows more and more in courage because he's faced with situations in which he must be courageous. So that's going to be the turning point, is when things begin to shift. There's going to be new challenges that arise that force new solutions in order to solve them. The next point of the character arc is going to be the transformation. And again, the transformation is going to take a long time. Growth takes time. And a growth arc doesn't have to be confined with the 120 minutes that a film is. There are books that are full series, and the character is slowly growing over the course of multiple books because growth takes time. Any endeavor that you try to do, for example, writing, when you just start writing, You're going to make mistakes. You're not going to be as confident as if you've been doing it for years, as if you've been doing it for decades. It takes time to grow those skills and to change and to shift in your confidence. And your character arcs are going to be the same way. You need to give your characters multiple opportunities, multiple challenges to choose to be who they are supposed to be instead of who they started as. To choose this change. Now, your transformation typically is going to be an internal change due to external circumstances. So you need to make sure that you balance your conflict to be external conflict that forces them to make those decisions. But you want to also balance internal conflict so that they grow as a character. If you can think about it this way, a lot of external conflict is the world forcing the character to do something and then they must act. That's going to be your plot. Your character makes choices, changes the world around them throws more things at them. They make choices that changes the world because of the change, etc., etc. It goes on. But an internal conflict is thrown at your character and it's forcing them to change as a person, which also impacts the world around them and how they interact with it. Balancing your internal and external conflict is really going to help balance your plot against your growth arc. A big part of the transformation for your story is going to be the dark night of the soul. Now, the dark night of the soul, if you're looking at plot points, specifically the hero's journey, is going to be the moment where everything has gone terribly wrong. Your character is at their lowest. Everything has gone terrible. They're alone. They've been captured. The relic was stolen. The villain wins. It's when your character is going to be at the lowest point in the plot. Their growth arc tends to be both, but it does not have to be both. The darkest night in your plot could be the moment where your character has to finally make that unchangeable choice, that irreversible choice to become someone new. But I want to give you all some encouragement and freedom in this. You can have your character go through the dark night of the soul for a long time. It doesn't just have to be one moment or one scene that this takes place in. And when you're studying plot arcs and plot points and different things like that, just remember that plot points don't necessarily have to be one specific dot in this line. It could be multiple events happening around this point. Like with what I talked about with the catalyst earlier. You could have the call to adventure, that's the inciting incident, but your character doesn't actually take up that call until later, where that's his catalyst. So these are going to be rough guidelines for you all. It's not you have to stick to it stagnant. Use it as a guide. So when you're dealing with your dark night of the soul for a character arc, this is going to be when they are at their lowest point. Sometimes the dark night of the soul is when your character finally gets what he wants. And your resolution is going to be that irreversible change, that irreversible decision. Every decision up until now could have been changed. Every decision in the story up until now, you can go back, you can make a decision and reverse it. But your resolution of your character arc is going to be that irreversible change your character makes, that irreversible decision to be someone else and to be in a new state. Now, I want to take an example for you all and lead you all through this process again and see based off of a character, one of my, if not my favorite character. How you can utilize this character arc framework in order to build your own arcs. I want to help you see it in action. We talked about Bilbo a little bit. Now we're going to talk about Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. And you will probably hear me talk about that show many, many times on this channel because it is just good. It is just good. It's well written. The characters are fantastic. The world, it is just good. And I will continue to use it as an example. But the initial state for character of Zuko is he is this very fiery firebender, very fiery, angry teenager, and all he wants is to capture the main character and drag him back to his father so that he can be restored to the title of Crown Prince. He begins in a very, very, very low state. And this is his status quo. Is he is seen as insufferable, he is seen as immature and angry, but he's the prince. He outranks everyone in his crew, so he's ultimately in charge. But then we see a storm. There's an episode called The Storm that this takes place in, and he prioritizes his crew's safety over capturing the Avatar. And this is the first moment of change we really see from him, is this, okay, I have to save my crew, because if I don't save my crew, then I can't go after him another day. That's probably the logic behind the decision, but the decision was still to take care of other people and let go of this obsession with restoring his honor. And we see him make these similar decisions throughout the show, very, very sporadically in the first season. But once we get to season 2, where he is wanted by both his kingdom and the kingdom that he's currently hiding out in, he goes from a prince to a prince who was banished to an outlaw and a fugitive and a refugee all at once. And it's going to this really low place, which, if you're looking at it from strictly like an earthly standpoint, this most people would consider his lowest point. His lowest point being when he is a refugee and a beggar, and he's searching for scraps to eat and traveling on foot and not know what to do and doesn't have somewhere to live. Earth, from like a very earthly standpoint, this is the lowest point for him. But in reality, he's still in that transformational phase of learning what the war is doing to everyone around him, how it's affecting both sides, how his nation is seen as evil and cruel, how people view him as evil and cruel. And he begins to make peace with living a life of peace and of being more compassionate and of working hard. So he's greatly shifted from prince to commoner and being very happy. Is that the end of the growth arc? Absolutely not. We're only halfway through. As he's finally enjoying probably the most happy we have ever seen this character. He's probably the most happy he's ever been in his life, outside of maybe a couple years in his childhood, and maybe his father is a terrible human being. He has another opportunity, or his original goal. He has another opportunity to capture the Avatar. And he decides not to take it. He decides to set free one of the Avatar's friends, not using him as bait, and living the life that he currently lives. And he's happy with it. Wonderful. Growth arc over, right? Wrong again. He's given the opportunity to work alongside the Avatar's team and their friends, and he does. He begins bonding with one of them. He begins earning their trust, and they begin helping each other out. And then his sister shows up, and when his sister says, "Help me capture the Avatar and you'll be restored as the prince," he sides with her. So we had this growth arc. He was at the end of the arc. He changed and then back to who he was. Now this is the true dark night of the soul for Zuko, is when he got everything he wanted. He was the crown prince. His father spoke with him. His father was proud of him. He was back in the palace. He was reunited with his friends. He was everything he wanted to be. He had everything he wanted. And yet he was the most angry and bitter and frustrated we've ever seen him. Why? Because it wasn't when he was sleeping in the gutters was the darkest night of the soul. When he had the wealth of nations was the dark night of the soul for him. He got exactly what he wanted. But what he needed was to stop this war and to truly be the prince and leader he was supposed to be. So he turns against his father, and that's going to be his irreversible decision, is turning against his father. And then going off and siding with the protagonist. And that takes time for them to trust him. He'd been hunting them for 2 seasons, had supposedly helped kill the protagonist. That's why he was rewarded his crown again, is because they thought he killed the protagonist. So it took a lot for the team to trust him again. But it was in helping them stop the war, that he actually ends up becoming the king of his own nation. And it's in that moment that his character arc is concluded. So you see how you can have a character arc look very different than the external perspective someone can have on supposedly what change looks like. Ultimately, Zuko ended up exactly where he began. He was the crown prince and going to take the throne at the beginning of his life, and he ended up being the crown prince and taking his throne. This destiny of his never changed. In reality, his character arc, his status quo, wasn't what we see at the beginning of the show. This angry, miserable teenager. His status quo was when he was in the palace, making decisions, speaking out against what was wrong. Because he spoke out against what was wrong, but it was right in his father's eyes, his father burned him, cast him out. And that's why we see him at the beginning of the show as this angry, miserable kid. He started his growth arc in reality exactly where he was supposed to be. But it was someone's decision, someone's action, that forced him to backslide all the way back here and have to figure out that growth arc himself. So when you're creating your growth arcs, make sure that you integrate both external and internal conflict. You can have a lot of things smacking at your protagonist, at any character, and that's great. That's going to force them to take action. But it's going to be the most impactful moments, the moments that we remember the most, are going to be those internal conflict moments. One of the moments that sticks out the most in the story of Avatar is when Zuko makes that shift to side with his sister after just siding with the heroes. After all of this growth he had. And that's because it was this internal conflict. And actually, if you look at the cinematography of that scene, it showcases visually the internal conflict. It's a great show. If you haven't seen it, spoiled it, but heroes tend to win in the end. Anyways, go watch it anyways if you haven't seen it. But having these internal and external conflicts, really balancing one another to help balance the plot and the growth arc and make them more cohesive. And you also want to integrate the same theme into your story, into your world, into your characters to make everything really mesh well together. Because this Zuko story would feel very odd. It would feel incredibly odd if the theme of the show was all about taking revenge. For him to make this shift, that doesn't make sense. But the theme of the show, there's so many themes in that show. But the overarching theme is becoming who you are by remaining who you were and seeing change in the world. It's all about the little changes, the steps of good in the world. How do you deal with war from either side of the conflict? It forces you to change whether you like it or not, but it's ultimately what you do with it. Many themes could be pulled out of that show. That's just the one I can think of the quickest. So you want to integrate these themes to make everything feel cohesive. If your story is going to be about war, then you're going to be talking about themes that deal with war. If your story is going to be about having confidence in yourself as the best dog trainer in the world, well, Zuko's story really, really, really doesn't make sense then, does it? So now we go to the question of the week, which is, what is your favorite character arc? I already told you mine, gushed about it enough. I'll probably talk about it way more in the future as well. And that's Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. In reality, there are a ton of character arcs in that show. I could have picked any one of them to talk about because they're all just fantastic. But that is one of my favorite character arcs of all time. But what about you? What is your favorite character arc? And is it a positive arc, a negative arc, or a flat arc? I'd love to hear more about your favorite stories down in the comments below and really learn what you guys love and which stories you really gravitate towards and what stories inspire you. Well, my scribes of the extraordinary, that is all I have for you today. I look forward to our next encounter as we continue going beyond entertainment, one step at a time.